Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It has been a hot minute since I've filmed anything. I think it's been over 2 months, and I don't have a ton of ideas, so I am just gonna steal someone else's ideas and do a tag video. This is the Get to Know Your Fantasy Reader tag. It was put out by Maddie the Book Pusher, and yeah, let's just jump right into it. So the first question is, what is your fantasy origin story? That is how you came to read your first fantasy novel. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember what my first fantasy novel was because I think I started reading fantasy as soon as I learned how to read. I think one of my favorites was Jeremy Thatcher Dragonhatcher, as well as Bunnicula. So these are books that I actually still own. I have owned them for, as you can see, many years. They are quite beat up, but that is because they are very loved. Again, I wouldn't say that those are necessarily the first fantasy books that I ever read, but they're definitely really early ones, and they're ones that really stuck with me. So the second question is, if you could be the hero/heroine in a fantasy novel, who would be the author and what trope would you insist be in the story? This is extremely easy for me. Tamora Pierce talking to animals. Done. What is a fantasy you've read this year that you want more people to read? I need to go into my yearly reading spreadsheet for this one because I don't remember what I've read. Yeah. So I haven't really read a ton of fantasy this year. And a lot of the stuff that I've read is pretty popular. Like I reread Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and I started reading the Witcher series, and based on how long I have to wait for each next Witcher book to be available in my library, I don't think those need the help. So instead, I'm gonna rec a book that I should have around here somewhere. Here we go. This is Resenting the Hero by Moira J. Moore. I just finished this one. This was lent to me by a friend. And this one is essentially about soul-bonded heroes, kind of. It is the first book in a 7-book series, so it is very setup-y, but I really enjoyed it. The characters are delightful, and I'm a big ol' sucker for soul bonding, so I think y'all should check this one out. What is your favorite fantasy subgenre, and what subgenre have you not read much from? I don't know. I really like magic schools or assassin schools. I really like magical tournaments. These are more just kind of tropes than subgenres. I do read a fair amount of urban fantasy. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's my favorite subgenre. It's just one that is really popular, so there's a lot of good stuff in it, but there's also a lot of bad stuff because that tends to happen when it's really popular. What subgenre have you not read much from? Magical realism, maybe? Yeah, I don't know. I read pretty broadly in the fantasy genre. Like, I read science fantasy. I would say that Gideon the Ninth is more like science fantasy. I read urban fantasy. I read like high traditional fantasy. Oh, historical fantasy. That's one of my favorites, which is essentially alternate versions of our world where magic exists. So it's sort of like urban fantasy, but set in the past. And sometimes it means that like the whole course of human history has completely changed. So like an example of that would be the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik, which is Napoleonic Wars with Dragons. The Spiritwalker trilogy by Kate Elliott is like the extended Ice Age ice magic, Ottoman Empire kind of historical fantasy. They're all really cool. So yeah, I do like historical fantasy. That's maybe one of my favorite subgenres. But again, I don't know what ones I haven't read much of. Maybe because I haven't read much of them, so I can't think of them. Who are your auto-buy fantasy authors? I don't have a ton. Tamora Pierce. That might be it. There are series that are auto-buy series for me, like the Megan Whalen Turner Queen's Thief series. As soon as that comes out, I have to read it immediately. Maybe Maggie Stiefvater is an auto-buy. I do end up buying, I think I've ended up buying almost all of hers. I don't have her werewolf series because that's just not the most interesting one to me, but pretty much everything else of hers I auto-buy. Ooh, Aliette de Bodard's House of Shattered Wings series. I need to get book 3. Oh, and N.K. Jemisin, actually. She is an auto-buy for me. As soon as she comes out with a new one, which she just did, I need to buy it like now because it looks really awesome. I think it's based off of one of her short stories that was in How Long Till Black Future Month. I think there was a story in that is the inspiration for this novel. Very excited. Anyway, how do you typically find fantasy recommendations? Goodreads, Twitter, etc. Really a whole lot of places. I would say mostly a combination of Twitter, BookTube, and just recommendations from friends, because I do have a lot of, you know, IRL friends that read fantasy, and so I will get recommendations from them. Yeah, not really Goodreads. Pretty much never. I will occasionally check, like if I'm interested in a book, I'll check its reviews on Goodreads, but I rarely like find that initial recommendation from Goodreads, if that makes sense. What is an upcoming fantasy release that you're excited for? Well, it's not technically upcoming because it like just came out a few days ago from the time that I'm filming this, but N.K. Jemisin's The City We Became. I just talked about this one. Yeah, I think it's gonna be really, really cool, and N.K. Jemisin is an autobi author. Okay, what is one misconception about fantasy that you would like to lay to rest? I don't know if this is a common misconception, but my mom once said something about how she doesn't like reading fantasy because she doesn't like when people can just use magic to fix all of their problems. And I didn't know how to tell her that magic often is the cause of the problems. It was like she thought that all problems were solved too easily because people had magic. And I'm like, yeah, but the bad guys have magic too. And often theirs is better. So that might be one, that like magic somehow makes it easy, because for one thing, the bad guys also have magic, and for another thing, the kinds of fantasy that I like at least have very specific frameworks and limitations that you have to work within. Like it's not just a free-for-all pass, you get to do whatever the hell you want. So that might count, I don't know. If someone had never read fantasy before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that came to mind as places to start, what would those be? Oh man, if someone had never read fantasy before, oh man, it's like I want to pick something that is like a relatively easy way to get into fantasy that isn't too old and isn't too like out there. Like I would not recommend N.K. Jemisin's 5th season series if you've never read a fantasy book before, because I could barely follow that series, and I have been reading fantasy my entire life. Okay, I'm gonna say the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner. It's very fantasy light. It is like Otherworld, but it's more about like the politicking and power struggles between these two countries, and there are just some slight fantasy elements that are woven through the series. So that one is good. It's also a quick read. Tamora Pierce is obviously a favorite of mine. You can start with the Alana Song of the Lioness Quartet. That one is her oldest series, and I think it does kind of show its age, so there might be some more recent ones that are better to start at. I don't know which one is the best starting point. Okay, one more. I should rec something in the adult fantasy world. I guess maybe Midnight Riot, the Rivers of London series by Ben Aronovich, partly because it's an urban fantasy, so I think in some ways it's more accessible because it takes place in a real city in modern day, and it's like also a sort of fun police procedural, and so each book is kind of its own standalone story. So yeah, those might be my 3. Queen's Thief, Tamora Pierce, and Rivers of London. Yeah. Who is the most recent fantasy reading content creator that you'd like to shout out? One that I like just discovered, he commented on a recent video of mine, so hey, sup? Fuck, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at names, give me a second. Here we go, Chris Bookish Cauldron. He does a lot of more traditional fantasy reading than I do, and right now he is doing a vlog series of like books that he's always meant to get to, that he's never had time for, that he's now reading while in this lovely self-isolation period. He's like the most recent fantasy content creator person that I have discovered. And then there's one other that I discovered, I think because of a readathon. Again, I can't remember her name. Give me a second. Right, this is Sarah Hart's Books. I think I discovered her because of like the Fantasy-a-thon or something like that. Anyway, she does also tend to read a lot of high fantasy. She also really loves the Scott Lynch Lies of Locke Lamora Gentleman Bastard series, which I do not, but we are welcome to agree to disagree on that one. And so I've been really enjoying her content. I think that she has a nice lovely voice to listen to, and you should go check her out. So because I am a terrible booktuber, those are the only ones that I can recommend you at the moment. But that is also the end of this tag. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. The people that I shouted out can now officially consider themselves tagged, and anyone else that wants to do the video, feel free and let me know that you did down in the comments so I can go watch it. Because like I said, I'm kind of a terrible booktuber. I'm trying to get better, but I just don't really know what's out there, and I find a lot of people talk too slowly. But yeah, let me know what's going on with you. How are you dealing with self-isolation? Or if you're not self-isolating because you're an essential worker, just sending all of the love and affection and support that I can through this itty-bitty internet screen. But yeah, times are crazy. Take care of each other. Like and subscribe and all the good stuff. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!